Buongiorno from our home in Sicily. Today we're going to talk about a hero, New York City's late lieutenant and detective Joe Petrosino, who was tragically murdered while undercover in Palermo by the Mafia. It's an incredible story we're going to talk about a little bit later. But first, this man was a trailblazer. He's revered as a hero in 2 continents for some of the work that he did on cracking down on the so-called Black Hand. Now, if you haven't heard of the Black Hand, we're going to talk about it a little bit more. But first, let me tell you that Al's family emigrated from Trecastagni, Sicily to Lawrence, Massachusetts, and had some first-hand experience with some extortion by the so-called Black Hand.
My father used to talk to me about the Black Hand. The Black Hand basically were a bunch of thugs. They were extortionists is what they did. They shook down businessmen for what they call the Pizzo kickback, okay? And they bothered people like people who own bars, restaurants, shops, etc. They thought, did you see The Godfather? Don Fanucci in Godfather 2. There you go. They operated for about 20 years. By the end of the 19th century, 1890, 95, and they petered out by about 1918 or so, when the Mafia, the boroughs of New York, kind of pushed them aside. So that's basically how long they operated, about 20 years, Esther.
The sad thing is that they went after the mainly Italian immigrants that went, including from Sicily, that went to New York, to Boston, and so forth. And your grandfather, after coming back as a war hero, was targeted. Talk a little bit about that.
My grandfather, Alfio Zappala, my personal hero in my life, and I believe also my brother Tommy's personal hero, came over. He never became an Italian American citizen. He came here under a sponsorship. In those days, they had sponsorships. And he came over here as a young, maybe 15, 16 years old. But then World War I broke out. And what did he do? He went back to Italy to fight for the Italian army, because, of course, the Italians were on the American side during the First World War. He joined the Italian army. He was there for 3 years. He rose his way up to the ranks. He was a sergeant, involved in heavy battles, believe it or not. Caught shrapnel in his face, which he had his whole life. Was awarded the Distinguished Service Medal. He was basically a hero. But he never said a word about his military service within the United States. When I was growing up, my brother Tommy was growing up, except, second hand, third hand, but the man was a very quiet, powerful man. In terms of, what I mean by powerful, I mean, walk softly but carry a big stick. I have a picture of him going back 50 years ago.
Wow.
He's holding a baseball bat there on our farm. One day the kids were playing baseball. He wanted to play baseball. He's here on the left-hand side, older in life, with my father and my Uncle Finney, Frank Lascola, during the Second World War. Quiet man, never did anything. After the war, he came back. He got married to my grandmother, obviously, on an arranged marriage. They didn't even meet themselves until the day they got married, right? They stayed married the whole time.
That's the way they did it. That's the way they did it.
But in any case, so he helped his family with a small market on Carmen Street in Lawrence. That was a little Sicily section. And one day he's sweeping up outside, and he noticed these 2 guys roughing up his uncle in the front of the store, right? So my grandfather, who was a guy that you shouldn't do that to, evidently he took care of these 2 guys to such an extent
they didn't do it again.
They never bothered him again. But that was a story there about my grandfather. And
so that scene played out not only in Boston, not only in Philadelphia, but big time in New York. So this guy, Joe Petrosino, let's talk about him a little bit. He was in New York, and he was brought up by an Irish family of all people. And he became one of the first Italian New York City police officers. Now keep in mind, at that time, there were a lot of Irish people in there. And I think what they did is they excluded, there was a height requirement, they excluded it for him because he was a short man, and he was among all these Irish taller police officers, but he rose through the ranks, and he was friends with Teddy Roosevelt, of all people, And he rose through the ranks by hard work and really having spoken many, many dialects. He was able to do deals with the Italian population much more easier than all the others. So he was able to infiltrate that population that was coming. And he rose through the ranks pretty fast.
He was what they call an enigma, okay? First of all, she alluded to his height. He was 5 feet 3 inches tall. He was like a little guy.
But he was,
But,
stocky.
Pretty tough looking. He was actually a friend of Teddy Roosevelt, because Teddy Roosevelt in those days was the police commissioner
Yeah.
of New York City, and they got to be pally-pally because he started to do a good job. Remember, in the beginning part of the 20th century in Italy, it was New York City was just teeming with Sicilian immigrants. Now, Joe wasn't born in Sicily. However, he was born in the Campania section down by Naples, which in those days was still considered to be, when he was born, part of the kingdom of the two
Right,
Sicilies.
before 1862. I think he
Yes.
was born 1860.
Right before the reunification. So he always considered himself to be part of the kingdom of the two Sicilies. And since he's so famous, the Sicilians think now he's a Sicilian as well.
Anyway, so what happened to him? So he was investigating the so-called Black Hand, and he had some word that there was something he wanted to go and investigate in Palermo. He was supposed to be undercover, but unfortunately the word leaked that he was in Italy, and in 1909, I believe March 12th, he was assassinated. And who sent this assassin? Well, this man that was rising in the ranks of Mafia here in Sicily, Vito Cascio. And who's Vito? Here's one of our guides talking about him.
Don Vito Cascio Ferro, Godfather, Don Vito Corleone. Where did that come from? Hold on, he did exist. Let's take his name, get rid of his last name, stick in the name of Corleone. Corleone doesn't exist as a last name. It's to represent the headquarters of the Sicilian Mafia. Don Vito Cascio Ferro. Why did he become the first number one? High-ranking criminal here, very high-ranking. Goes off to the United States of America, early 1880s. To do what? To do what? Nobody was really clear. He ends up in jail in the States, so he's not up to any good. When he came back, all became clear. He becomes the head of issuing passports when he came back to Sicily through his corrupt political and criminal connections. So what? Tied in very nicely with his future plans and the Cosa Nostra. What was happening here? Thousands and thousands of Sicilians were off to the United States of America. First stopping off place, New Orleans. Why? Well, slavery was abolished, whilst the unification of Italy over here left Sicily in poverty, people desperate to leave. And so New Orleans is the first stopping off place. Why? Slavery's abolished in the States, opens up the floodgates for a brand new workforce on the sugar canes in New Orleans. They're flooding over. Something big happens in New Orleans. Deviate the Sicilians. They were hated by the locals. Why? Head of the police in New Orleans, Hennessy, shot dead. His final words? It was the Dagos. He was investigating criminal activity amongst Sicilian clans. Sicilians are lynched, public hanging. Ellis Island's opening up, they're deviating. So what was Don Vito Cascio Ferro up to in the States connected to getting Sicilians over to the United States of America? High levels of poverty and desperation. Don Vito, he was very shrewd indeed. These Sicilians hadn't been outside of their own towns, let alone go to another country. They were worried. They were scared. They needed to be reassured. Don Vito turned round and told them, don't worry, you will be reassured. You will be taken care of back in the States. By whom? The sister organization he set up. Have you heard of the Black Hand?
Now, this guy that you just watched, he's in Corleone, and we have a whole video on Corleone and Mafia in Sicily, and I'll leave you a link for that. But it's a fascinating video. You don't want to miss that. After this one, go watch that one.
Let me just fill in a couple of the blanks here for you. The reason he went to Sicily, because by that time, Teddy Roosevelt was the vice president, all right? And they had formed what they called the Italian squad, as Esther had alluded to. And there was a lot of things that he did with the Italian squad, but really what they were trying to do was kick out from the United States people who had criminal records. So there was a law that would be passed that if you committed a crime in Italy before you came here, within 3 years of immigrating to the United States, out you go. So he went originally to Palermo to investigate the criminal records on people back in New York City so they can get the boot. I mean, that's really what the story was. The fellow that Esther just alluded to, he was only in the United States for a couple of years, and at this point in time, I want to say something, okay? By the time Mussolini came into power, okay, and the fascists came into power, you could say what you want about Mussolini, that he gassed the Ethiopians and all this other stuff, but one of the accomplishments that Mussolini did was he eviscerated the fledgling mafia, so to speak, especially the Black Hand, which had to go underground. They really went underground until after Mussolini was killed in the Second World War. So in any case, this fellow that she's talking about, that was patented, that Mario Puzo in his book, The Godfather, in the movie Godfather Part 2, created Don Fanucci, that character, the guy that got shot in the mouth and every place else. And the name Don Vito Corleone was kind of like a mix-up of all that stuff. It was very interesting, based on this this period of time. It was a rough and tumble period of time in New York City for sure, and also Chicago, of course. The rise of Al Capone came there, and Philadelphia. Let's not forget that. And also we had Shaka. That's where the Italian immigrants into the United States settled. And it wasn't until a good 20, 25 years later, after they came at the end of the 19th to the 20th century, where organized crime, and I'm talking about basically the Black Hand on steroids, the five clans in New York City, for example, and also in St. Louis, Missouri. Holy smokes, Kansas City, Missouri,
Boston.
And Boston. But and to this day, I don't care what you say, there's still a linkage between the Sicilian Mafia in Sicily, which has been eviscerated essentially. Ndrangheta from Calabria, which is the most powerful now in probably all of Europe, and also the Camarada in Naples. Those are the three southern. There's a lot of smaller ones too, mafiosi.
Can I just add something that Joe Petrosino did that not a lot of people know, that he found out that there may have been a attempt on the life of President McKinley while he was investigating the Black Hand and some of these other people. And he warned McKinley, and McKinley didn't heed his warnings, and even Teddy Roosevelt said, no, you got to listen to Petrosino. He knows what he's doing. And unfortunately, we know how history turned out, that McKinley was killed later that year. And one more thing that he did, because some of this stuff still exists, the way he investigated the Mafia, he was really a trailblazer. We talk about Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, but he came before them starting to investigate the Mafia. He really laid the foundation for a lot of these future Mafia fighters. He was one of the first. And some of the things that he established, he had the Italian squad that he led, an elite group of detectives. He started the bomb squad, which is still in existence today. Imagine that, an Italian-born immigrant in New York, over 100 years later, something that he started is still in use. Now, I want to go to our friend and Sicilian Project board director, and also someone who is on the Joe Petrosino Association in the United States. And here's Joe talking about Joe Petrosino.
It was a famous Lieutenant Detective, Joeseph Petrosino, born in Padula, went to America, became the first really Italian-American that achieved Lieutenant Detective status, formed the Italian squad. He formed the bomb squad, which to this day still exists, the K-9 unit, which to this day still exists in New York. He decided to go after the Black Hand, which was a predecessor to the Mafia. As you know, they just pride on their own people, unfortunately. He was called, by the way, the New York Times of all newspapers called him the Sherlock Holmes of America. Had a tremendous number of arrests every year. came to Italy to talk to the government about carefully screening and vetting the people that they sent to America that were from prisons. And so while he was here incognito. However, the newspapers, as they usually do, will find out there's a mole that told him that he was here. And while he was in Padula with his family on his way to Palermo, the newspapers published that Joe Petrosino was in fact in Italy. But he insisted on going and meeting with the capo of the Mafia in Palermo. Unfortunately, to that day, he was assassinated when he met with him. And ultimately, of course, died and was brought back to the United States. And think about this, in 1909, there were over 250,000 people lining the streets
Wow.
of New York
Wow.
for this brave Italian-American cop. Just a tremendous tribute. And he is the only, just imagine this now, the only NYPD that is honored to this day.
Wow.
He
What
died
a story,
in
Joe.
1909, and to this day, every March, we go to his tomb in Calvary Cemetery in Queens, New York, and we pay tribute. The police does.
And this is your organization that you are a member of.
So I'm on the board of the Lieutenant Detective Joeseph Petrosino Association in America. We're a trilogy. There is one in Padula where there's a museum. That's where he was born. And there's a group in Palermo. It's the Petrosino Association in Palermo. So we have one where he was assassinated in New York, where he created, and where he was born in Padula. And so to this day, we pay tribute to the law enforcement throughout America, but more importantly, to the New York Police Department.
Hey, Joe, I want to say thank you so much for everything you do for the Sicilian Project, for Italy and Sicily, one of our longest friends and contributors and supporters, and we love you and just so appreciative that we had this time together.
Oh, so am I. It's an honor to do things for my heritage. Having been here when I was 9 years old the first time in 1947 to meet my grandparents and my uncles and aunts.
Grollo and Castellamare del Golfo.
Yeah, so Castellamare del Golfo, I know my cousins 79 years.
Wow.
That's pretty amazing, you know.
Now, this young man right here is 88 years old, and he
not
is...
yet, not until October.
Not until October, but let me tell you, looking great.
Thank you.
Looking great. God bless. Grazie mille.
Okay.
Joe, we love that hat. That's why we're wearing it. Thank you, Joe, for bringing this. And I believe, may I take your hat off for 1 second? Because I got to show this.
Right there.
Right there.
That's the badge and shield of Joeseph Petrosino that Joe gave me from the society. So I wear this
very
hat
cool.
very proudly. But you want to know something, Esther?
Yeah.
While he is one of the most famous early
Yeah.
Italian immigrants, let's not forget, every time you land at an airport called LaGuardia Airport,
Yeah.
let's not forget about the
There's
little
many.
flower, Furio LaGuardia, who was the mayor of New York City, and under him coalesced what was the good, all that is good of the Italians in New York City. It was a source of pride.
Yeah.
Because, again, let me say this, okay? During the early part of the 20th century, the Italian immigrants that came here were degraded. They were subject, because they were the lowest rung, so to speak, on the socio-economic path, and they were discriminated against everybody. As a result, they had rotten jobs, okay? And the women. Let's not forget about the women working in the sweatshops. Let's not forget about a lot of things that culminated in 1912 with the Bread and Roses strike, which were basically people protesting against unhealthy working conditions in these sweatshops. And from that, the movement of the AFL or the CIO got started unionizing for safety and children's rights especially. So a lot of this period, this is a very interesting period from,
Yeah.
from the beginning of the 20th century to 1920, 25. We don't talk about, but really we ought to like flesh it out a bit in the
That's
future
why,
episode,
that's
okay?
why we're talking about
Yeah.
it here.
You know, we spend a lot of time, effort, and energy researching stuff. We scratch the surface for you. But you can help us out continue our research on very interesting periods of Italian and Sicilian history that Americans maybe not up to speed on by joining and being a good member of our community for the cost of $2.99 a month, which is essentially a cup of coffee, or $1.99 a month. You'd be surprised how this one over here can stretch that money, and she makes me drive all the way over to the other side of the world so we can capture video for you. So that's what I would say. Our community, there's a button down there too,
Yep,
right?
it says
There's
join.
a button. What does it say?
It says join.
It says
Listen,
join.
if you want to learn a little bit more about Sicilian history, I have a whole playlist called History and Culture. We have lots of good stuff there. Now, let me tell you something. 11 years ago, we published our first video, and I was looking through it, and there's one video in particular that I'm, going back and looking at, and some of our old friends, Roberto and Katya, and it's so full of fascinating stuff about history. So I'm going to leave you a link at the end of this video. Make sure you go watch this and see what we look like 11 years ago.
No,
And
it was
then
a good
I was
video
thinking,
too.
and then I was thinking, wow, how far we've come and how many videos we've done since that video when I was a little bit of a newbie, we'll say, in Sicily, my very first year.
Listen, Esther, and I've said this a million times, okay? I'm an old timer, I'm a geezer. This one over here was like a duck in water coming here 11 years ago. She couldn't speak a word. Matter of fact, she'll admit it, she had to look and see where Sicily was on the globe, on the map.
No, I had to Google it.
She had to Google what Sicily was all about.
I
But
did.
that notwithstanding, to have 550 some odd videos up on Sicily makes us the top videography people in the world on Sicily. And how many views we have last month on just Facebook alone? 2.5 million.
Listen, here's what I know.
Right, on Facebook,
we
2.5
were just,
million.
we were at the beginning, we were just throwing, or I was just throwing videos up there free for you guys and really not paying attention to YouTube. And then recently I made a commitment after COVID or around COVID that I'm going to put a video up there every single Sunday, Sicily time, 4 o'clock, even when we're touring, even when I'm with a group for 17 days and there's 2 Sundays that fall in the middle, I will get up and make sure that that video is there for you on Sunday at 4 o'clock. So you can bet that I'm not done yet, and you can count on Sunday videos coming to you. On that note, I want to say thank you, Al,
Could I say one more
for
last thing?
bringing me here to Sicily.
Nah. Supposed to be for 7 weeks, she's never left. 11 years. How can I get rid of her? No, that's not true. But what I was going to say, in all seriousness, Esther, besides the video work that you do,
Yeah.
and the organizational work that she does for our tour business, which is done spectacularly well, again, thanks to you, never forget that it's you, people who are watching our videos, that make us motivated to do this type of thing.
And we thank you.
And if you have any ideas that you would like us to do on future videos, topics or places, but make sure it's not a little place that's this big on the backside of Mount Etna. with
I like
population
those too.
of
Those are
4
fun
people.
too.
No.
Those are fun too.
But if there are anything, topics that you want us to cover, we would be happy. Because our season is going to be starting in September, our touring season. So we have 7 or 8 weeks left over here, maybe 6 or 7
to
weeks.
do a little
to
something
do our
extra.
gallivanting, and we love to gallivant.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. Buona domenica. Ciao.